My son is a hateful incel, and I just cannot save him or defend him anymore. My boy, my oldest child, was so good when he was little, but something broke inside of him when he was a teenager. My wife and I always accepted, loved, and encouraged him. We pushed him to work hard and treat people with respect. I don't know where exactly we failed him, but as a father I feel responsible for the thing he's turned into. It started when he was 14. He had begun to become withdrawn and emotional. We chalked it up to teenage mood swings. For some reason he was just so angsty and bitter all the time. We were worried about his lack of social life and his over-reliance on his computer. He kind of hid himself in the online world, so my wife and I began to limit his computer time, but he simply became more aggressive and confrontational. His hygiene was bad, and he was always confrontational when we told him to shower or do laundry. His room stank horribly, and we eventually had a huge fight over it where he physically shoved my wife and called her a bitch, and eventually we got him to at least clean and air out his room regularly on the grounds that it was our house, and if he couldn't maintain his space he wouldn't be entitled to it. Essentially we got to the point where we told him he wouldn't be allowed his worldly possessions or privacy unless he took care of the space we all shared. The room still smelled and he was still rude about cleaning it, but we could tell him to get it clean and he would do it after that. We ended up getting a call from his school saying that a female student felt harassed by him. We were shown messages where he continually badgered her to have sex with him, threatened to punish her for stringing him along, sending her unsolicited nudes, telling her some violent fantasies of his, and eventually just descending into some horrid rage-filled rant about how she is just another whore and other things. We were shocked. We explained to him why this behavior was unacceptable, and I explained to him that it was okay to be sexually active, but his actions were toxic and abusive. I tried mentoring him man to man, taking him on camping trips and whatnot, and talking to him about women and girls and trying to give him advice. I suggested he try showering, changing up his hair and facial hairstyles, trying out different fashion styles, maybe going to the gym. I told him some hard truths, that he doesn't want a gross woman, so he shouldn't be a gross man. By gross I mean hygiene and looks. I explained to him that good looks are more hygiene and self-care than genetics, but he refused to accept what I said to him. After that I caught him sniffing his sister's panties in the laundry room. She was 12 at the time and he was 17. He assured me it had nothing to do with his sister. He said he just had a panty sniffing fetish and he pretended they belonged to girls from porno videos, but still I gave him hell for it, and he was grounded and lost his computer for 6 months. I went through his computer and I was disgusted by the kinds of hateful, racist, incel forums he frequented, the horrid things he said about women, and his save file was full of cartoon porn with girls of questionable ages. I wiped the hard drive completely and began strictly monitoring his online activity. I used parental filters to block incel sites and porn sites that hosted cartoon porn. The next big issue was something he did to my daughter's friend. My daughter is 5 years his junior, and one day after a sleepover, my daughter came to me and said her friend wanted to tell me something but was afraid of what I would say. My son cornered this 13-year-old girl and physically blocked her path and touched her hair and face while making very inappropriate comments about her body and asking her if she liked to sleep naked and what kind of underwear she wore. I tore into my son for that. My wife and I both shouted at him, and told him his behavior was horrible, and I told him then that if his actions got him arrested I would not defend him. He accused us of not loving him, but I told him the reason I was so passionately angry in that situation is because I do love him, and I want to help him become a good man so he can stop being so predatory and bitter and miserable. I told him some hard truths. That he did this all to himself and that he is the only one he can blame for how bitter he is. I suggested he look to women his own age, and he went on a rant about how it was a waste of time because women were already whores, and his definition of a whore is a woman who has had sex even just once, by 17. I called him out on his bullshit and expressed clearly that if he harassed young girls anymore I would personally turn him in. I invited my daughter's friend over after and I personally apologized to her for her experiences. I cried in shame for my son's behavior and begged her forgiveness for allowing her to feel unsafe in my home and promised her that if she ever felt uncomfortable she could come to my wife and we would always believe and help her. Luckily, my daughter didn't lose this friend, but for safety I installed a lock on my daughter's door. We got my son therapy but he refused to engage with the therapist, calling him a sand nigger and paget and terrorist. His next therapist was a Chad, so he didn't relate to that either. We fought about him not trying, not getting a job, and he said he couldn't get one because of the immigrants, to which I pointed out that he was struggling because he got fired from his high school jobs for being lazy. After those fights, my wife tried to empathize with him and understand what made him so bitter, but he flipped out at her, and called her a cock-gargling whore and said that she fucked her way through dozens of men until she found a beta fag who was willing to shelter her for missionary sex. My wife, who works and contributes to the family income, who is an independent, professional woman. Honestly, I lost it more than ever before. I had never been so angry when I heard what he said. That may be his mom. He may be my son, but the woman he was abusively tearing into is my goddamn wife. No one can treat my wife like that. I am ashamed to say in my anger, he shoved me and I physically retaliated, shoving him back, and pinning him against the wall. I felt ashamed of myself. I have never been an angry or violent person, but I couldn't control myself. I've never put my hands on either of my children in such a way in my life. I hate child abusers. But this boy was no child. He was a grown man. He was intimidated and backed down, and for a while he was peaceful. The last straw was this week. My daughter has dated 3 people her whole life. A boy, a girl, and now another boy. We were as open about sex with my daughter as we were with my son. We asked if she would like to have a question-free steady supply of condoms left in her bathroom drawer, and if she wanted to get on birth control. She said no to both questions with her first boyfriend. She never really brought him home, but we met him at one of her recitals. When she had a girlfriend she went over to her house all the time, and didn't want to bring her to the same house her brother lived in, a sentiment I understood. But her most recent boyfriend has a lot going on behind the scenes in his family. He's a nice boy but his mum is a single mom of 4 and they struggle. This boy started coming around a month after they got together. I like him. My daughter is happy with him. He treats her with respect. He is an intelligent boy. He's an absolute gentleman. He's respectful and polite in our home. He calls me sir, calls my wife mom. He offers to help with the cooking or dishes or cleaning while he's visiting. He talks to us. He's a bit of an amateur cook himself and brings us food all the time to say thank you for taking care of him. When we go out for dinner he always offers to pay for himself and my daughter, though I know he doesn't have much money so I always pay. When getting out of the car he opens the door for my wife and offers her his hand. He sits behind her for legroom. He holds the doors. When we leave somewhere he helps my daughter put her jacket on like those sweet old-fashioned couples. This young man works hard, and gives what little he has to his mom and siblings. Like I said, I really respect the boy. I offered him money once for groceries for his family but he turns me down and says he would feel guilty accepting my money like that. He's appreciative of things. In the winter, it was -20 and he had only a hoodie, so I draped my jacket over his arms, and I said take it son, it's cold. He had tears in his eyes as he said thank you, and I made some excuse about wanting to get rid of the jacket and told him he could keep it if he brought cookies for us next time he visited. When Christmas came along, I invited him over for supper, and when I went to pick him up I delivered some presents for his family, and on the ride back to my house we had a moment. He was crying because he didn't have much to give us. He got everyone in our house a present but he cried anyways because he felt it wasn't enough to make up for what we gave him. I pulled over, and I just hugged him, and I said to him that it wasn't the value of what he got, it was that he got us anything at all. I thanked him for treating my daughter so well, and I told him he would always be welcome in my home. My own son didn't get us anything for Christmas, not even a car bought with the money we give him. This boy got my wife and I matching wine glasses since we like to share a bottle every now and then. My son didn't eat with us. He pillaged the food table and ran away to his room alone while my daughter's boyfriend met my sister and her family and my parents and my uncle. They all told me how charming he was and how polite he was. Meanwhile, after dinner, my son told my 5-year-old nephew "fuck off faggot" for asking to play a game with him. A man over 20 years old. Last week, my wife and I went out for an evening to ourselves. We went to dinner. Then we went to an upscale bar to play some pool. Then we went home. When I walked in the door, the kids were screaming at each other. I came in to see my son and my daughter's boyfriend fighting. The boyfriend was just pushing my son back and trying to redirect him. My son was throwing punches and charging him. My daughter was crying and sitting against the wall clutching her face. I got between them and pushed them apart, and demanded to know what was happening. My son went on a tirade about how he found birth control pills and heard whore sounds from her room, so he kicked open her door and discovered them having sex. He said he couldn't believe his own sister would be a nigger's whore and called the poor boy a monkey and other things. My wife got my daughter and her boyfriend out of there and I yelled at my son for how he was acting. Eventually I got nowhere with him, so I made him wait in his room. I went to talk to my daughter. I apologized to her boyfriend, crying as I did, telling him that I hope he could forgive me for letting this happen. He said he was sorry for getting violent but that he only did it because my son hit her. My daughter cried and said he was a psycho and threatened to rape her, and that he admitted to ejaculating on her toothbrush and hairbrush. I charged into his room, and I said firmly that he should pack his bags and leave. I told him I would pay to have his things sent to him, wherever he went, but that he was leaving tomorrow. My wife stayed at my sister's, and my daughter and her boyfriend spent the next few nights at his place. The next day I practically threw my son out of the house kicking and screaming. I took his key back and changed the alarm codes and garage door code. A day later I had a message requesting some of these things, mostly his gaming stuff, be delivered to some strange apartment block I didn't recognize a couple of towns over. A college-aged man buzzed me in and I delivered the stuff. I didn't see my son. My wife and I then went through his room. My daughter's boyfriend came over and helped me move his furniture to the garage. We threw out his mattress and some other more gross and smelly things, and we took out the carpet to be replaced. Hidden in the closet was a treasure trove of my daughter's underwear, so saturated with old, moldy semen that they were as hard as bricks. The unnerving part was that there were a few pairs my daughter was adamant didn't belong to her. And they were too small for my wife. It was possible he stole them from my nieces. There was a sketchbook containing graphic drawings of my son violently raping different women and keeping little girls chained up in some kind of sex dungeon. I went through his old phone that was still working, and all his photos were screenshots of my nieces and their friends in their bikinis, lots of cartoon porn, lots of red pill and incel and Trump memes. He still had Messenger, so I checked his messages. Most of them were just him trying to harass women and underage girls. I checked his email and, much to my disgust, he stole private photos of my wife from her phone, and he was selling them. Today, I went to the police with everything and told them everything. I gave my baby boy everything. I don't know why he went down this road. But I'm just so sorry I failed him. I don't know what the police will do. But I hope they stop him before he hurts someone else. The sad thing is, yesterday, once it was all over and settled, yesterday we had a wonderful day. One of the happiest we have ever had. Edit, there is a lot to sort through. It's impossible to reply to everyone, so let me hit the big points. All the incels this post attracted can fuck off back to their holes. How do I know the lingo? From my son. Why didn't I take his computer time away? I specifically said I did. His laptop was forbidden to be used in private, and I banned most of the sites he was using with the parental locks. He bought or stole another laptop behind our backs though and used his phone data. My wife and I don't use our phone internet much, so we didn't think of it. It wasn't Christmas last week. I know. It's November. The young man visited us on Christmas 2017. We had this fight last week. I don't know how I have to clarify that there was a passage of time between the fight and Christmas, since it's pretty clearly not Christmas right now, but alright. Why wasn't he in therapy again? This is a common comment from people who must have skimmed because we did put him in therapy. He was abusive towards several therapists, so we gave up on therapy. Why not have him institutionalized? Because that is my son. To have him locked away is not an easy decision. I love him. We wanted to believe he could still change. But he couldn't. I have no idea who he moved in with. I don't care. Maybe an Airbnb? Why didn't you help him sooner? Was he bad as a child? As a kid he was introverted but not especially bad. He misbehaved sometimes but it wasn't troubling. He had a few friends but they all had a falling out the first year of grade school. Prior to harassing that first girl he had some red flags. He seemed depressed, and his hygiene was spiraling. We tried to help him but he was stubborn. He didn't want help. He wanted to be miserable. I listened to his problems and he complained about how his dream girl went after some other guy and how he stole her from him, and I tried to guide him and help him understand she wasn't stolen because she isn't property, she's a person who made her own choice. He didn't like that answer. All the things you say we should have tried, we mostly did. We gave him lots of attention and love before all this and after. We still tried to be a family. My daughter and her boyfriend helped me clear his room since I cannot carry certain heavy things myself. My daughter was therefore present when I found her underwear. She singled out a couple of pairs as not hers and was scared of where he got them from. She suggested keeping them for evidence. There was a teacher who did get through to him somewhat, for a time. But he transferred to a different school district. He wasn't horrible all the time. Sometimes he could be good to be around. He could be really funny and clever. He was really good with animals. He was good with his games too. He got really passionate and excited about them and it made me happy seeing him having fun with a hobby. Seeing him smile could almost make me forget the things he'd done. Telling me to kill myself says a lot about yourself. I've seen what toxic ideologies do to families. I'm not interested in joining your red pill, Jordan Peterson, or child-beating cults. Advocating child abuse as a 20-something brat shows your immaturity. Advocating murder does too. Toxic masculinity is considering men weak for having the strength to express their emotions. Many complaints about allowing my daughter to be intimate with her boyfriend all stem from the same racist incel rhetoric my son used. There is literally nothing wrong with interracial couples. I couldn't be happier that my daughter is with someone who loves and treats her with dignity. Incels struggle with reading, evidently. My daughter had her first boyfriend at 15, and I doubt there was anything going on between them. She is currently 18. So yes, she probably has sex. As an adult woman. Not really anyone's business. My son is 22, soon to be 23. Edit 2. With new replies coming in by the truckload and 3 new PMs for everyone I reply to, I am getting slightly overwhelmed by the response here. I can't really keep up, even just reading. I have begun skipping comments to keep up. I have things to do today but I'll try to catch up every so often. Edit 3. Mods locked the thread. I am not sure why but there are almost 10,000 replies and maybe 500 PMs to sort through.